Hey everyone, I'm Marcia,
And I'm Stacey.
and you're listening to the God of My Girlfriends podcast.
We're happy to have you here.
Welcome everyone to the God of My Girlfriends podcast. I am Marcia, and I'm here as usual with Stacey. Hi Stacey, how are you?
Hey, Marcia, good to see you. Nice to be here together.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. And we have our dear girlfriend Amie with us today. She's back. It's good to see you. I've missed you, Amie.
I've missed you. I've missed you showing up on the Sunday night things. And I want to say that not to like guilt you into, it's just sincere. I do miss your input and stuff like that. So,
Thank
and
you.
I love seeing you both face to face.
It seems like just so our listeners know, Stacey hosts a Sunday night Zoom call that's called the Deconstruction Zone. And I love it. I love it so much. I love being a part. And it seems like every week for the last few weeks, I've thought, oh, good, I can join tonight. And then something pops up that I can't be there. But y'all need to check that out if you want to be a part of some really great discussions that Stacey leads. And sometimes Amie leads them. And anyway, we can put some information in the show notes about that. But yes, I love our Sunday night get-togethers. I appreciate Stacey you putting that together. Are you what are y'all talking about right now? Do y'all have
Yeah, we have been talking about most recently who God is to us now
Oh.
at this stage of our deconstruction. And, the summertime is kind of hard to do anything too heavy or long because of all of our schedules over the summer. But we are getting ready to kick off a conversation about Danielle Schroyer's original blessing, her book, Original Blessing. So we had her on the podcast last season, and the Deconstruction Zone is picking up her book to read it and discuss it in November and December of this year.
Oh, yeah, I'll link in the show notes to that episode because that was a good one. That is a great book too. So I'll have to definitely, now that fall is coming and maybe things will settle down a little bit. Although I did see this funny meme the other day that said adulthood is just saying things are going to slow down next week over and over and over.
Week after week.
Yeah, it just seems like, but no, I hope I want to be in on some of those conversations. That's great. And speaking of summer, it's over. Are y'all ready for fall?
Definitely.
Do you have any fall
I
plans?
don't like the heat.
Me either.
No, I don't. It feels very oppressive to me, especially like it's humid up here in Ontario. So it, no, it's not my favorite. This morning was the first morning that I think it was 10 degrees, like Celsius. It was pretty cool this morning, which, when you're in your 40s, you really appreciate a nice cool morning.
For sure, for sure. Of course, Stacey lives in Florida, so you must enjoy the heat if you move to Florida.
Yeah, I enjoy air conditioning a lot. Summertime. And we're getting some landscaping done for the fall just in time. So we've got some magic that's going to happen in the backyard. And I'm really excited about it because I want a place to put a fire pit and I want some more flower beds that are in the backyard. I used to think I wanted to fence the backyard, but with all of the critters that we get so many different animals that cross through the yard. I just don't want to fence it for that reason, but I do want to add some kind of excitement back there with some more native flowers and opportunities, just places to sit with a fire pit. So I am counting down the days for like those 20 days of really cold weather that I get every year.
And you don't have to worry about your neighbor coming into your property.
No, considering the fact that she's been dead for 2 years or whatever.
What?
She has got like a little singular cemetery plot like right next to her house.
Oh,
so it's not like you're gonna need a fence to keep the neighbors out.
Oh no, you just I think though you've had some excitement in your backyard. You posted the other day that snake eating that frog.
That was in Dave's backyard. That
Oh
was quite.
my oh
Hmm.
my gosh. I was like, "What is that?"
I miss that. And I'm
Yeah.
pretty, on
Yeah.
top of my Facebook game, but I missed that one. I gotta look it up.
Yeah,
It
look it up.
reminds me of what my mom used to say, which she cross-stitched this and it hung in her office or somewhere in the house my whole life. But it said, if you eat a frog in the morning, nothing worse will happen to you all day. Something like that. So as soon as I saw that snake eating the frog, I thought, yeah, and because it was the morning, I'm like, yeah, nothing worse is gonna
No.
happen.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I would wanna walk out to my backyard and see that, but then again, I had a snake in my bathroom
You
a few
had
months ago, so
yes, you did. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
that
pretty
was
thankful to be living up here. I mean, we have snakes, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have to worry about any of them in my house.
Well, I'm so glad you're with us, Amy. It's really good to see you. And we we've been talking a lot this series about getting in touch with our authentic selves. And later in this episode, we're going to talk with my friend Irene Williams, who has some great knowledge to share with us about that. But I was thinking about we've been talking a lot about how to get in touch with our authentic self, but we haven't really talked about why it's important to do that. And there are many reasons why, obviously, but I was just wondering about what y'all think. What are some reasons about why we should spend time getting to know ourselves well?
Amy, I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Twist my leg. I'll say something. Yeah.
Come on,
Um,
Amy.
yeah, I can talk. Um, yeah, I grew up in a very specific denomination, church denomination, and it was predominantly one nationality in terms of like what the background was, where most of the people came from, and so and we were taught from a specific way of looking at scripture of what being a woman meant and what being a man meant, and within our church culture, school culture, and whatever, I learned as a girl. I'm not really sure, what influenced me most, but when I showed up in certain ways, people would have a reaction to it. So if they had a negative reaction to how I was showing up, then that was a cue to my mind to not be that, to tone that down.
Mm,
And then, when you showed up in another way that made people happy or made the situation better, then that was a cue to kind of turn up the volume on that attribute. And when you grow up in a conservative, very specific belief system around what being a woman and what being a man meant, then that formed who you are. And it wasn't really about getting to know who your authentic self was. It was very much outward focused. You were looking at, how is my behavior? How are the people around me reacting to my behavior and how I'm showing up? So it was very
wow.
much outside of myself. And then at some point, the bottom falls out of life for whatever reason, and things kind of are all splayed out on the ground. And you look at it and you think, okay, who am I? Because so much of who I am is just based off of the culture in which I was in. Do I? And it's well, almost exactly like our faith. When the bottom drops out of our faith bucket, our
Yeah.
faith is still there, but our what we believe in maybe is shifting.
Mhm.
Then we look at, what do I want to keep? What do I don't want to keep?
Mhm.
And it's almost like clothing, right? You try this on, you see how it feels for the day, and and it's all about exploring the world outside of you, God outside of us, and then also inside of us, God inside of us, and yeah. And I think we're the most effective, and we're the most beautiful, and we're the most compassionate when we are our authentic selves. And so surround ourselves with people who will allow us to experiment and not judge.
Mm,
Mm,
that's beautiful and
thank
so
you.
true. What about you, Stacy?
I think of it in terms of Enneagram a lot because I like how the Enneagram framework speaks to our integration path
Mhm.
and how we integrate thinking, feeling, and doing. And we integrate in order to move beyond the restrictions and framework of our own specific type. Like we move in and around all the types in the Enneagram. And that to me is it speaks to being very regulated, very healthy, making good choices, being very compassionate to ourselves and to others. And so I think as we journey closer to authenticity, I don't think it's really a destination that we get to, but I think these are the choices that we make over time as we become more and more self-aware. What really works for us, what keeps us in that regulated place, what keeps us compassionate and extends that love that we foster for ourselves, it extends it outward into the world.
Mhm.
That to me, I think is authenticity, really knowing who we are, what our strengths are, um, becoming more aligned with how we take that and out into the world.
That's great. Yeah. Oh, yeah, both of those are great points. I think one of the things that I've noticed as I've worked towards getting to know myself a little bit more and getting in touch with who I am, what I like, because I had a similar background to you, Amy. Just I was trying to fit into the circles that I was put in, and sometimes you just lose yourself in the midst of trying to be everything to everyone else. And as I've tried to really get to know myself through the last few years, one of the things that I've noticed is that I've been able to be bolder in using my voice because I'm more secure about what I believe in, about, do I believe this, or do I believe that, or why am I believing this just because I was taught this? Have I examined this? And I've been doing so much of that lately that it definitely has helped me find my voice and be bolder in speaking up in one-on-one relationships or in groups or on social media, to the chagrin of my husband. Sometimes it's like, you're oversharing again. But you know, I know that the three of us all watched this new film that just came out that I think is so important, and I want to talk about for just a minute, that is about using your voice. And it's by Kristin DuMez, and who wrote the great book Jesus and John Wayne. And the title of the film is For Your Daughters. It's a fantastic film. I'm actually hosting a little screening of it at my house Friday night. Some women are coming over and we're going to have dinner and we're going to watch the film because it's only a 30-minute, it's a short film. You can see it on YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes to it. And I was so struck by how important this film is. I was like, I want to host a screening and talk with it. But I thought we could talk about it a little bit today too. Obviously, it's a little bit of a hard topic to talk about, but the the film is really, it's stories of abuse and betrayal and resistance in the evangelical church. So just one of you guys start. I know you both watched it. What were some of your takeaways from the film?
It
I think for
was
me, oh, sorry, Stacey, go ahead.
it is something that is hard, very hard to watch because of the vulnerability that's expressed by those whose stories they're telling their stories. They're very vulnerable stories.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about authenticity, and I'm thinking of one of the women who was just, being herself. and living her life and feeling really safe. And then it turned out that she was in the situation where she realized she was being chased and attacked by a man that she trusted, a pastor. And in that moment, just the fear that she had and the vulnerability that she expressed, and not knowing if she was going to be supported through that. And I could just feel her fear, and I could feel that shift that must have happened within her that changed her forever. When I think about authenticity, like her authenticity was impacted in that moment, like who she was, who she became, is forever changed. And I think the people that are in our lives do that. They impact us, and they impact us sometimes in very traumatic and abusive ways. And there's so many of these stories in the church, and they need to be told. They're important to hear, and it's something that is painful, and it should be painful. It should cause us a lot of grief and fear, and cause us to want to do something about it, and to continue to be people who protect what's good and right, and who serve justice upon those who would prey on our children and on us. It was a really powerful and short, it's very short. It's so powerful.
It is. Amie, what were your takeaways?
I probably will watch it again and again. Is it triggering? Absolutely. It fires up in me many emotions. It's triggering because some of it is my own experience. Throughout the short documentary, there were some things that were said that actually opened up things that had happened in my own life and dynamics. And so that was a bit eye-opening. So I was thankful. And that's the power of telling your story as well, is that it opens up truth for others. I did, if you don't mind, I would like to say their names. And I think it's really important to honor those who speak out, because a lot of times they speak out and then the focus is placed on the perpetrator and not on the victims. And I think that these women were extraordinarily brave.
Yes.
Because I was saying to you, Marcia, when we speak about our own situations, there is a price to pay. It takes a lot to say, the very first clip is this woman with duct tape over her mouth, right? And it says silent no more. And it takes a certain point, and I love the title of this because it's called For Our Daughters. Because if it were for myself, or for myself, it would be more comfortable for me just to be silent about the things that have occurred in my life, and possibly, for them too, for these women, it's more comfortable in some ways to just let it go. But at some point you realize that this is a system that uses God in order to create an entire atmosphere that grooms women from birth to be submissive, and to be in a place of power under a man. And we look outside of ourselves for affirmation and for confirmation, and we're taught to look to men to do these things. And we're told, by using scripture, we're told that women, or that men are, I was taught this, prophet, priest, and king of your home, of your church, of your school. And so you don't, talk about living in authenticity. We're taught to always look to these people. And not only are they the prophet, priest, and king, we're told that, but because we were taught that God is a providential God, that these people are not placed there because people voted them in. They're placed there because God placed them there.
Mm.
And then these people use their power or even the system that they're within. So if they are people who are within the church grooming people within the church, they are using the system in order to continue perpetrating abuse and grooming. And they know that they'll get away with it because we're taught to forgive and to love. And he who is without sin cast the first stone, So it becomes very confusing. I don't want to take up all the time, but one of the things, I was talking with a friend of mine, and one of the things that we were talking about is, 10 years ago, if a man would have come up to the front of the church, confessed his sin, what would you have done? And I probably would have done what those people did. They gave that man a standing ovation because we all want to believe in grace and redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has really opened up for me a curiosity, because that is my go-to, is to think the best and to give grace and to be compassionate and to believe in redemption.
Mm.
But part of that system is allowing people to continue, right? And it's really opened up my mind. So I just wanted to read off their names because I think that they were really brave.
Absolutely. Yes.
So Kate West, Jules Woodson, Krista Brown, Tiffany Thigpen, and then Kristin DuMez spoke, as well as Rachel Den Hollander, who, these women who speak out, and I think there was a couple men too. People who are speaking out are paying a big price.
Yes, they are. And that's why women are choosing to be silent. They're afraid of this price that they're going to have to pay, because just like in the very beginning, when they show the pastor coming up front, admitting what he's done, and then getting a standing ovation and a pat on the back, and now let's go on. The women are not being treated that way. The women are being shoved aside, called harlots, acting like it's the women that have seduced these men, and the poor men just had a moment of weakness and we're just going to have to forgive them. So these women are not only being sexually and spiritually abused, but then when they come forward to say it's wrong, they get abused more by the church, by leaders in the church. It's beyond mind-boggling to me to find out how invasive this is in so many churches. It's heartbreaking.
And if you don't say that you forgive them, right? That happened with, I think, Kate, where with Jules Woodson. What did they say? They said they were saddened to see that Miss Woodson was not on the same path of healing as her abuser. Why? Because she was angry, because her body still felt the effects of the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And, in my case, I was labeled as being, I don't have a heart of reconciliation, because I wouldn't step into that, confession, repentance, and then forgiveness and reconciliation in the fashion that they felt was appropriate. And it's heartbreaking. And it's also confusing for women.
Yeah. It feels like it becomes more about, the men protecting the system.
Mm-hmm.
Not even just men protecting men, but protecting the whole system.
Patriarchal.
That continues to abuse women. And sorry, did I interrupt you, Stacey? You were about to say something.
No, I think that this week, the week that we're in right now, as we're recording, we have a lot going on. We have destruction and across the United States from the hurricane. We have all of this political upheaval going on, and everything is seems to be politicized. And as I was and have been considering that, like the you're gonna have to edit that one out. I don't know what the word is.
Politicalization.
Zation.
Yeah. I mean, everything is politicized.
Yes.
And watching this video is just one of those times when I see really clearly the history of, I mean, this isn't new. This has been something that's been fostered and grown and nurtured over time. And I can see how it's just spread into our politics, the conversations around women's health and women's rights, and just the things that are so off that they seem like they can't even be real, but actually men saying that women shouldn't be able to vote.
Right.
It's like it's just hard to believe that this is where we are, and that there are people out there who want it to be this way.
Right.
And I think when you put God's name onto it, then women will also fall in line, because what a lot of women desire is to obey God and to please God. And so that's one way that I think that is, a lot of people will get hung up on people saying, oh my God, because they'll be like, oh, you're using God's name in vain.
Right.
To me, this is the ultimate using God's name in vain. When you attach God onto your personal agenda to gain power over another person or group of people, that to me is what God means, or what, using God's name in vain is all about.
Amen. I believe that too. And I actually also just read this book, just finished a book called Ghosted by Nancy French. I don't know if you have heard of that or know who Nancy is, but it's a fantastic book. She tells her story, and she was actually sexually abused, groomed, and sexually abused by her youth pastor when she was just a young girl. And then when she grew up and decided to, tell her story, the way she was treated is horrible. It's so inspiring though, because she didn't let that stop her, and she actually has gone on to be such a great voice for women, and even wrote a whole thing on a church camp here called Kanakuk, where there was layers and layers of sexual abuse that was covered up going on at that camp. And she was so brave, and it's such a great story. I'm actually going to try to reach out to her and see if we can get her on the podcast, because I was just totally inspired. But it seems like it's all around me these days, and I'm just by coincidence. It was not like I'm like searching out these things, but sometimes when those things come to you, in layers, you're like, okay, I think I'm supposed to be paying attention to this stuff. And so I just think it's the hope in it. It's a hard subject, but the hope in it is that, yes, that we can help our younger women, our daughters, be bolder in saying what is right and what is wrong here, and not be afraid. And the more that we can start these conversations, I think the more other women will feel like they can come out, and that there's safety to speak. They're safe to speak up. Because I know that many many women have not felt safe in the
I
church.
think it's a sad reality that we're taught that these are our prophet, priest, and king, and that they're um, servant leadership and all that kind of stuff. And it sounds really good. But
Mm.
I've seen time after time, and I absolutely love the denomination and the people that I grew up with. Like I do, I love them.
Mhm.
But I've seen it over and over and over again where women and girls go to the church. Sometimes they're confessing sin, or sometimes they're, saying that these things happened, and they're going to them for help. And it's not helping. It's hurting even more.
Right. Right. And even women that are in abusive relationships with their husbands are being told that they can't leave and stay in good standing with the church. And, that just blows my mind how someone can say that. Although, I look back on my own life and I did stay in a relationship much longer than I should have. And it was because of the church we were in and because of the pressure I felt to not leave, because I knew that I would be disenfranchised. I knew that everyone would turn their back on me. And
And I
so,
think also that idea of forgiveness and grace and mercy,
mhm,
you know, when we look within our own lives and we see God's grace and other people's grace and mercy towards us, then yes, we just want to extend that to other people. But
mhm,
we need to be taught, somehow we need to be taught, what does mercy look like? What does grace look like
mhm,
in these situations?
yeah. Well, like you, I'm glad you named those women in the film, because I just think they're so brave, and because of uh, their actions and being brave and speaking out, I do think more and more women are starting to say, "Hey, okay, me too." Um, and I hope that more and more women will choose. I saw something here recently about how for the first time ever, more men are religious than women, or more men are going to church than women. And it's like, why do you think that is? Women don't feel safe in the church. They're leaving, right?
Well, it's the word religious is one we should key into, because I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
The practice of going to church is not faith. It's not healthy spirituality. It is getting up, getting dressed, going to church, doing the things that we believe we're supposed to do, or going through those motions because that's how we want our image to be in the world. And that is not relationship. So I don't care if there are more men going to church or more men who claim to be religious, because still, relationship is what we find with those who may not even be in church.
Mhm.
Certainly in our lives, we find people that are loving and kind and compassionate, but perhaps have never stepped foot in a church. And that's still spiritual and what we might call religious, but it's a different way
Mhm.
of expressing faith. So I really, it's just
Yeah,
that was just a really annoying headline to me.
I know. Yeah. Spirituality and religious uh doctrine doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. I was even thinking about this morning. I was like, do I consider myself religious these days? Because when I think about being religious, I think of someone that goes to church all the time, you know, has a lot of, religious, what are the words I'm thinking of? It's not
What's it? Practices or spiritual.
practices.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't feel like I have very many religious practices at all. I have a lot of spiritual practices that I do at home, but I don't know if it's just kind of saying that out loud. I don't know if I consider myself religious. That's really weird.
Hey, I like it.
I don't have that many spiritual practices other than, I do a lot of what I call mulling things over in my head.
Mhm.
And I think that while I mull those things over in my head, I believe that there's a spiritual aspect to that,
Yeah.
you know. And some of that I think of, I was like, oh, that was kind of a prayer, or that was, you know,
Mhm.
whatever. But
Yeah.
I'd say the most religious thing I do, or spiritual thing that I do on a regular basis, would be showing up on Sunday nights.
Aw, I love
Yeah.
that. There's some
I
great
don't know if
conversations.
Stacey wants
Me too.
those two things to be like lined up together. But I view, like, I have friendships. Like, we have online friendships, we have friendships with
Yeah.
people out, whatever. To me, that's a spiritual experience. That's a
Yeah.
church experience. When I just sit down and talk with my friends about what they're going through,
Mhm.
to me, that feels like church.
And it's connection. And if we believe that we are temples of the spirit, when I gather here on Zoom with both of you, our spirits are in connection.
Yes. That's
And
right.
that's relationship, and that's faith. That's our faith and practice.
Absolutely. And I'm
Mhm.
thankful for that. I'm so, people talk about how, oh, relationships online are not the same, but you can develop real relationships online. And I'm y'all are two that came out of being online for me that I just love dearly, and I'm so grateful you're both in my life because I think you're both really wise, loving, wonderful women, and I am grateful for y'all. So
Yeah.
anyway, well, thanks for the talk. I know it was a little heavy today, but if we can just encourage other women to watch that film,
Mhm.
you can actually go to their website and there's you can download a discussion pamphlet that you can
Oh,
can have conversations with other women about it, and maybe like what I'm doing, host a dinner, get together, have some dinner. We're doing that on Friday night, and then just sit around, watch the film, and discuss it, and have a safe place for some conversation around it, and how we can change the narrative, as Lin Manuel Miranda says in Hamilton, change the narrative around this, because I think it's important. So, all right. Well, thank you, Amie. Thanks so much for joining us.
thanks for having me.
You're
It
just
was
precious.
delightful.
It's
Yes.
great. And I hope your fall comes very soon. I hope you get your cool weather. I'm hoping
Yeah,
that
leaves are falling, and I'm celebrating a birthday next week.
you
So
are.
yeah,
Happy early
Well,
birthday.
happy
thank you.
birthday.
Thanks.
That's
So
awesome. Well,
I like the fall. It's good.
yeah.
And Thanksgiving is coming up for us.
Yeah.
Couple weeks.
Ours is in November. So, and
November. Yeah.
I love the fall. I love everything about it. So I'm excited. All right, everyone stay tuned because we are about to have a conversation with my friend Irene Williams. She's a speaker and a writer and a podcaster. She has this awesome podcast that's called the Irene Williams podcast. And she has two or three. That's why I had to hesitate. But you're gonna love her, and she's gonna talk about how we can find our spark. So y'all stick around and we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome, Irene Williams. Thank you welcome back, because you actually were with us. I just looked it up. I couldn't remember. It's season 1, episode 8 that
Wow.
you agreed, and it was back in 2021, believe it or not.
Surreal.
I know. And you agreed to come on. I was so interested on that particular episode. We talk a lot about your digital decluttering group, and
Yes.
we'll talk about that, or program. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, welcome back, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy to be here. Any chance to have a great conversation with quality human beings. I'm all about it.
Did you hear that, Stacey? We're
Yeah,
quality
let's
human.
quick. Let's run out and see if we can round up some of those. Give us 10 minutes. We'll be back.
Oh man. But same. I've had kind of a rough summer, and I was just so looking forward to these podcasts starting back up. Stacey as well, and we were saying, these are life-giving conversations for us. We're so blessed to have this opportunity to talk to people that we probably wouldn't have conversations with besides this podcast. So, although you and I do get to meet outside of this now and then, so I'm grateful for that. Before we get into your work, though, can you just tell everyone a little bit about, your life now and where you live and what you do, and just give everyone a little overview of that?
Sure. I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been here a long, long time. In this season of my life, am focused on the field of personal development and professional development. So I'm coaching executive and entrepreneurial women. I do have a separate business called the Digital Life Academy, where I teach digital wellness and how to be human in a digital, social, mobile, hyper-connected world. And a lot of that gets into practical tactics about staying organized and not being obsessed with your tech. And I came to this season after a full career in public relations, marketing, and eventually social media management, all that good stuff. For 13 years, I ran a digital marketing agency that did really well. And I came to a season where I was just interested in different things. And so I exited that business to clear the path to do new things. And that's where I am now. So I feel like I'm really lucky to be able to have made a pivot that's so dramatic, honestly, in terms of professional life in this season, and do that at a time where I'm young enough that there's still years in front of me to really create something new.
I love that. Yeah, you have several podcasts, and we're going to get to those in a minute. And so if anyone wants to know, her digital decluttering podcast is called Confirm Humanity, which I love that topic. I love that
Yeah.
title. That's a great title. And I took her little beta digital decluttering course. It really, I don't know about you, Stacey, you may be better, but I was really overwhelmed with my digital life, between too many photos on my phone and too many emails and just all of it. And Irene really helped me with that. So I appreciate
Yay.
that.
Yeah, it's hard not to get overwhelmed or find yourself suddenly like just this morning, I actually got out of bed when my alarm went off instead of checking my emails and stuff from my phone, right? And
Quite a
that
feat.
made a huge, it makes, and I know it does, but when I do it, I'm like, gosh, I really like my mornings better when I actually get out of bed.
And don't start scrolling. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, for
Yeah.
me, getting digitally decluttered now, at the time we're recording this, 7 years ago, more than 7 years ago, that turned out to be something that had been a roadblock that was preventing me from really making some progress. By getting organized digitally, I became better at running my business, delegating to my team. I freed up hours in my day. And that's when I started studying and diving into things that were just of interest to me. So, who would have ever thought removing one thing would clear a path for so much more? And sometimes we get cluttered by digital life and we don't even realize it's happened. Maybe we're obsessing over our weight and we spend 30 minutes in the closet trying to find something to wear.
Yeah.
And that's a block. I mean, there are so many things that kind of clutter our lives, and just tackling one in an intelligent, lasting way informs how to do that to other things blocking us, and you're off to the races.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. And it's nice to hear ways that your work is, as coaches and leaders, it's sometimes interesting to me to see that what we target as our program or the content we want to provide for others ends up being exactly what we need for ourselves too. And so it's good to hear kind of that personal experience from you too
Yeah.
that drives
With
what you do.
Yeah, in all of this, my hope is to teach and share from my scars, not my wounds. So in other words, I want to be on the other side and be assured of the sustainability of what I have to share, and its legs and its substantiation. And that's why, like, I was digitally decluttered for 2 years before I started actively teaching it. So I could absolutely speak to the lasting benefits and the ease of management of what I had to share. And even in my coaching, which is life coaching for entrepreneurial women, everyone has a unique story and a unique path, but I come to it with my experience. I don't have all your answers, but I have certainly got deep empathy and understanding of the path.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your spark?
What is my spark? Well, the beauty of it is, I have a podcast that I attempted to call Find Your Spark because I wrote a little song. Once I realized I didn't want to talk about, like in decluttering your mind and your life, I would often say early on, so that you would have time for what matters. And over a course of, probably 2 years of creating content, I was like, when I focus on what matters, think about that almost literally. It sounds really heavy and it can be mentally weighty. So I shifted. I was like, I want to live into my spark. I want to design a life that sparks me. And in the shortest context, which is oh so helpful on a podcast, it's basically living into my code of core values. When I'm aligned with the things that just deeply resonate, that are really soul-centered, that sparks me. And then there's a little formula that I teach, and it has to do with kind of your natural genius, the things that you're just innately brilliant at. We all have them. And what just interests you, what you find fascinating, and then what aligns deeply with those values. And you start to get these little buzzes, these moments in life where you're like, well, that's cool. I'll follow that a while, So the spark is not necessarily one thing. It's just an energy and a light throughout everyday life where you're living into the things that really resonate with you. And sometimes we just need permission to let ourselves go there. Like on this podcast, we often talk about God, and I believe God wants us to live into our spark and our light. The things that matter come with that. But we have to come from that place of love and light, or we'll just get really burned out otherwise.
That's so true. That's so true. And I started, and I think this is correct. So your amazing husband, JP Williams, that everyone loves, you created a podcast together because he's also a coach. He's a songwriter. He's a very successful songwriter here in Nashville. And you decided together to start this podcast called The Blonde Leading the Blind, because
Yes.
JP is blind, right? And you are?
And I'm committed to staying blind.
Good for you. So what I loved about that podcast, and I don't know if y'all are still doing it. I know you did several episodes.
Yes.
But they're all like maybe between 5 and 10, 12 minutes. They're not long. You break down one just really important, and it's weird that you said about the core values, because that's one I had listened to recently. Let core values be your guide. That's actually a topic on one of your podcasts. And it was I just loved it. It quickly became my favorite podcast to listen to in the morning when I was just putting on my makeup, and it would just give me like something to think about that day. Like, how am I approaching life, or how am I approaching a problem? And I just loved it. And then you started the Irene Williams podcast.
Correct.
Have you left JP behind forever?
The story on that is my wonderful husband. I love doing the podcasts, and I really appreciate these short form podcasts because it's like you said, it's like, just while I'm putting on makeup, just give me something to think about. I don't want to take too much of a deep dive sometimes. And so he knew I had this inkling to do more with podcasting. So he was like, we're not recording the next Blonde Leading Blind until you get yours going. And it's more of a joy project for me than him.
Gotcha.
So we're not decreeing that the Blonde Leading the Blind is gone forever, but the priority shifted to what I'm creating. JP, on his path, he has a corporate gig. He works for a mental health platform. So it's a little more structured. He's coaching people for sometimes like 8 hours a day. So then to hop on a podcast and talk about these things, that energy goes elsewhere for him. So I love our podcast. and there are wonderful episodes out there that
Mm-hmm.
will live on. But so we'll
Yeah.
see if we come back to it. But the Irene Williams podcast is I call it my microdose of intelligent inspiration for the day.
Yeah.
So it carries on that format and those simple, helpful, hopefully, topics for folks. So
Yeah. I was telling you before we hit record that it seems like this, especially this season, we're talking a lot about authenticity and about how to really, find your true self. And there was one particular episode of your Irene Williams podcast recently that I was listening to, which was "Why Do People Feel Alone?" And can you talk about that for just a minute? Because
yes. So, well, I'll be really honest. When I riff on those, I'm not exactly sure, how I
yeah,
worded it then, but
right.
this is a drumbeat of teaching that I bring to everything I do. And we hear a lot about the epidemic of loneliness these
Mm-hmm.
days,
Mm-hmm.
which is real. It's actually something that is measurable in terms of mental health. But I have a theory among many that one reason we're so lonely is because we're lonely for ourselves.
Yeah.
We live in a world of massive input. We as human beings need connection. That is, we are social creatures. We were born to have others in our lives. But in this hyper-connected world and just the nature of being human, when do we pause and really tune into our code of core values? What sparks us? What just delights us? When is that not influenced by the inputs? So a big part of what I teach is finding, it's actually a concept I call brand true you. You hear a lot of professional and personal development gurus talk about be a new you. And at the start of the next year, you'll hear time to find that new you. No, find the true you. She's already there. She's just it's an archaeological dig to get to her
It
sometimes
is.
because of all the inputs. But yes, find true you. And then when you seek connection, you're finding that right vibe, not a tribe to fit into. You're
Mm-hmm.
finding where you genuinely belong. There's
Mm-hmm.
no contortion. It's just that cosmic connection. We'll go back to the word spark, that electrical little buzz sometimes when you make those amazing relationships that just come naturally because you brought true you to the mix.
Right. Yeah, that's what you actually said in there was, people feel alone because they're disconnected from themselves. Like,
Right.
and that's what really hit me. Yeah,
Mhm.
there, and I, as an Enneagram 9, I can speak to feeling disconnected from myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
in our if you come from a background of Christian spirituality and faith, we're taught I was taught the formula Jesus, others, yourself. And so
Mhm.
yourself came last, and I had to get into my adulthood to go, I
mm,
need to move up in the equation.
Yeah.
If I'm to
Yeah.
love others as myself, that means I'm supposed to love myself. And
Right.
that there's that like little, nudge of, am I allowed to do that? Please.
Yeah. And I think do is such a great word because I think in whether it's church or career or wherever it is, just regular home life, we focus a lot on what we do. And so that reinforcement is everywhere. It's all about doing. And
Mhm.
so authenticity gets lost in that. And I just had a session with a leader today, and he was writing out what he does well as a leader, and it was all about doing.
Mhm.
And yet the feedback that he had about why he's a good leader is all about connection.
Wow.
And he just didn't see it for himself.
Mhm.
So I think it's really important to really consider. We have to slow down a little bit and really remember why it is the values, like you said. What are our values? What's driving us to do what we do? And how do we bring more of ourselves forward? There's some research around this too. There's a lot of research actually, but why authenticity? Because it can be a buzzword, but
Mhm.
there's research behind what it means to be authentic and how if we aren't authentic, we don't care so much about some of the spaces we're in. We're more likely to let go of responsibilities because we don't feel connected to the organization or whatever it is. So when we lose that connection, we lose ourselves and how we're connected, we're less likely to buy into whatever it is the group's trying to accomplish.
Mhm. Well, and so often we end up in groups that didn't align. They're wonderful things. They're amazing causes, but they're not in tune with who I am or who you are, but it feels like the right air quote thing to do. And it's okay to let go of certain things and find where you authentically connect and what really, not only delights you, but tugs at your heart in a balanced way. That's something that, because
Yeah.
over the years, a much younger me felt very obliged to participate in certain things because it just on paper seemed good and correct. But if I can't be authentic in that connection, then I just shouldn't be there. There is something else out there for me to participate in and support.
I remember reading a book several years ago by Max. Is it Lucado or Lucado? Lucado?
I never know. It's a word I read and never
Yeah.
hear out loud.
But it was called The Cure for the Common Life. And I read it probably 15, 20 years ago. And I bet if I went back and read it, there'd be things in it that I probably don't agree with these days. But the one thing that I am trying to realize that at this point in my life, there's hardly a book or a speaker or anything that I'm going to sit there and go, I 1,000% agree with everything. But I try to
Exactly.
take what's for me, what works for me, take what speaks to me and leave the rest. So this particular book, what really stood out to me was it was talking about how we are created by God individually with certain wants and certain things that spark our joy and certain passions, and we're all different. And we have several things. We're not, we don't just have one talent or one thing we like. And his book was talking about, you try to find all of those little things together, and that's your kind of your sweet spot. So like if you if as a musician, say you're talented with music, but you're but you hate traveling, you probably don't want to be a road musician. you know
Ding, ding, ding.
ding ding ding, probably don't want to go down that road. Let's go, that's fun. But so you have to find like where your strengths are, and somewhere all of those strengths are just going to like conform into this what he calls a sweet spot. And I think that's maybe where our true self lies, maybe.
And that's in the way I coach and share. That's essentially, it's a spark formula
Oh.
when you converge those. So his language was, what you just shared. And that's the beautiful thing. Nobody owns these concepts. They're kind of out there as factual and truth. And so this is how I come to share it's that convergence of what are I call them the natural geniuses, but it can translate into your talents or your intellectual acumen, what just interests you, what draws you in, and where your curiosity lies. And then and then always undergirded by your core values. So when that formula comes together, you can actually generate your own spark. We live in a life where we experience these beautiful, unexpected sparks, and then to kind of follow it. But it's the great thing when you realize you can actually generate that on your own and create it and then live into it. You don't have to wait for the magical moments, though we love them when they happen. But if you're living into that idea of spark, you're probably going to invite more of those opportunities anyway. And that is not a woo-woo law of attraction there's actual science behind it. I'm really geeky. I'm all about neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and supporting anything I share. So it's conceptual, yes, but there's substantiation behind it. These are the ways that we as human beings that are both science and spirit can make these things come together. So I love the continuity of what you read long ago, tying into this new construct that I'm sharing now in terms of finding your spark.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I saw your certifications on your site and wanted to kind of ask you about how coaching with you works. Could you tell listeners a little bit about what you incorporate and what it's like?
Yes. So I think one thing that I do that's not 100% unique to me, but very important to me, and I don't know a ton of people who do this, is a lot of times I just want to bring you back to your brain and biology right away. We live in a world where it's very easy to moralize and diagnose and kind of overthink what's going on in our lives. And one thing I do with all my coaching clients is like, let's dial it back to how your brain works. There is brain chemistry involved in procrastination, and we moralize procrastination as a character flaw. No, it's not. That's your brain trying to protect you because you have a daunting task in front of you, and your brain is your most metabolically expensive organ, and your brain wants to conserve energy. So the big thing that's looming seems really taxing. So let's scroll social media or watch Netflix or take a nap. It's so understandable. And when you remove like the judgment and the moralizing and even the pathologizing of things and just realize, hey, that's my brain working normally, then you accept that limitation and then you're prepared to move beyond it. I start my sessions and I ask people, did you get a good glass of water before you logged on?
Mm-hmm.
If you're feeling a little wilty, sometimes you just needed some water, a decent meal that wasn't junk, maybe get out in the sun a little bit. Like sometimes let's start with the most simple solutions first and escalate only as needed. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
this word, I grew up in faith. And so I accepted all the miracles and all the big fantastical stories that came with my Christian faith. And in this season of life, with a little more time, because I digitally decluttered my life and freed up some time, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really realized one of my sparks, my interests that aligns with, I think, some acumen that I have for it is neuroscience. And so I'm a student of neuroscience. I don't have a degree. I've gotten a certification for coaching in applied neuroscience, but being able to bring the science to the spirit, I'm very open to the fact that things happen that we can't explain. I keep a list of miracles in my life, but I also can see the science that supports that. And when science and spirit meet, and you can get a little twinge of understanding, it's so powerful. And it really, I think it's a beautiful common denominator that makes us all connect even better. It's not like I was chosen for this miracle. You're chosen too, because wonderful stuff happens and can happen for all of us, So,
Wow. I love that. So I've got with you and Stacey both as coaches, I'm just going to throw this question out. So we've talked a little bit about the difference between therapy and coaching on this because I know I think coaching is still a relatively new concept for people, and they're like, should I get a life coach or should I get a therapist or should I get a spiritual director? I mean,
Right.
it's like there's so many new terms these days of what we want to
Yes.
go. So, but I also know that with coaches, a lot of coaches tend to have specialties. Is that correct? So you want to find the coach. Someone said therapy is sort of helping you process past stuff and how you got where and but coaching is more helping find where you are now and helping you go forward. Does that resonate with you two at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I would also acknowledge that, like, one of my certifications is in trauma-informed coaching, and that is certainly not at all in replacement of therapy. Would never ever claim that. But I quickly saw when I started coaching that I would be making great progress, and then we would kind of hit a wall. And what I found was happening, I think clients got to a comfort level with me and started sharing past very traumatic experiences that were coming up and causing them pause in their immediate progress in the present. So for me, I wanted more training and understanding, very science-based,
Mhm.
so that, again, I am not stepping in to answer that for anyone in terms of what a therapist would do. But I wanted to have that awareness so I could spot it more quickly, advise that they move over to therapy if they so desired, or couple it with the coaching. I've seen countless times where coaching works beautifully in concert with therapy that's still ongoing.
Yeah.
So the way I describe it is I'm trained to address all time zones, past, present, and future. But obviously, in coaching, we want to not dwell in the past. We want to respect that and realize there may be unresolved issues, but we want to get you to a place where you can be more proactive to move forward. And I
Yeah.
do call myself a life coach for entrepreneurial and executive women because it's really about who you are. I'm not a business, a lot of people do call themselves business coaches, and I understand there's actually great value in being searchable online if you call yourself that, but I really want to address the whole person. So I've chosen that language for what I do because work issues are never siloed from life issues. They're
Yeah.
all blended. We are a whole package when we come into any situation.
Yeah, I think that forward momentum really is the key. If something's slowing down, forward momentum, and there's something rooted in the past that's kind of an anchor to that momentum, then that would be a pause and a time to consider if a specialist like a therapist needs to come in and help navigate that past anchor, whatever it is, so that it frees up the momentum again to look at here's where I am now and here's where I want to be next. But you're right. I totally agree that when you're talking to someone about their lives, you dip a little bit into past, present, and future, and you should.
Mhm.
And to get the best care to that client, sometimes it takes someone like a spiritual director, someone like a therapist. And I hear people all the time saying, if in an ideal world, everybody would have one of each, all
Mhm.
three.
And I've also heard it described as if you're dealing with trauma, and a therapist works much like a specialist or a surgeon. And then when you're ready to heal, you go to the trainer, and that's what a coach
Mhm.
is. You start to build strength where it's time to
Yeah.
heal and move
Yeah.
forward. So
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, we all need, I obviously this is a podcast called God and My Girlfriends, and girlfriends can help us a lot, right? They can help us in certain areas, but sometimes you need somebody that's can zoom out a little bit more, that's a little bit more objective, and that can help us transition, especially into certain new areas of life. And so for you, Irene, I know you say you're coaching with entrepreneurial people, but you don't limit it to just that, right?
honestly, it's such an adventure what comes through the door. Right now, I'm working with someone who's a man who's writing a novel, and he needs coaching just to accept his own artistry and creativity.
Wow.
So I have to have something to package and tell the world, but once you get out there and connect, I'm very open to what those opportunities might be. And I'll side note that works because I come from my core talent is writing. I have not written a fiction novel, but I understand a creative process. And with my undergirding of coaching experience, certainly can not only help him with some concepts as he's sussing out the structure of his novel, but really it's about the coaching because we are sometimes our own roadblock. And certainly that's just one example. And I've done that with a couple of other people that were working on bigger projects like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's the adventure. I'm still kind of in the infancy of this new chapter of my career. And it's fun to see what naturally sparks, what comes together, and what is a good fit for what I can offer and offer in terms of support.
Oh. Well, tell us what you have on the horizon. What's coming up for you?
Yes, so I have been in the thick of my own creation and coaching myself through it, and sometimes using the thing I'm creating to coach myself. And it is a program called Find Your Spark. And it's essentially the full framework of what I offer in a 6-week coaching package. And it's designed for not only someone considering a career transition, but just some big life decision. I actually think what I'm creating, I can't help but think of this all the time. I wish I had had this in college when I was
Mm.
trying to figure out what to major in and what to focus on. So I want there to be a collegiate version of what I'm creating, but it's a program
Oh,
called
cool.
Find Your Spark, and it's going to have it has 3 modules. The first one is Brand True You, and it's the journey to truly connecting to your true self in a way that lasts. The next section is called Interfluence, which is a term I've made up about our ability to influence ourselves. And again, this is science-based. It's like all these intuitions that we have that I know. So I substantiate that for you. That's where you get in touch with not just your core values, but a code of core values that you'll use as a filter. I teach about pre-decisions, how you can arrive at certain moments in life already knowing essentially because you have your values in place, how you would respond even in the unpredictable, the unknown. And then the last is that light and energy. And so it's where we talk about, I've just mentioned the formula for finding your spark. There's a little bit of a dive into your life satisfaction at this point, and then how do you want to take action after that training and all that self introspection is put into place. What do you want to do from there? And that could be career wise, it could be life wise. I've coached people who thought they came to me because they were considering a career transition, and they actually made peace with where they were professionally, but they changed something else in their life that made that all come together. So there's no assumption that the outcome will be anything specific. I just want people to be really open because once you're on that journey, things do become more clear along the way.
Mm.
So, and then that one day is going to be a book. And I want to do live retreats. So it's all starting at the time we're recording this. This is all bubbling, but by the time this goes live, the course will be available through my website and all that good stuff. But that's been the fun creating process and granting myself the time just to do it, you know? It's something that I've had with me for a long time, but I'm really thankful to have, in my own way, created a season that allows me to do that in a way that I just can enjoy and do it so thoughtfully and so confidently when I put it out in the world.
Well,
That's exciting.
I know, it's so exciting, and you can just see you're glowing talking about, like, you found your spark. This is something that you feel called to do, that you find joy in, and I know you're gonna make a huge difference in people's lives with this. I'm so proud of you, my friend. I think this is so fantastic, and we will definitely put links on the show notes to your website, irenewilliams.com, and to all of your you just have the 3 podcasts?
Just 3.
Okay.
But,
Just
the
3.
joke is
Only 3.
it's, this the starting of a podcast network is my joke.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're gonna have an empire, a podcast empire. No, that's so great. And I love you were talking about finding your vibes, not tribes. We were talking earlier. You started a little group here in Nashville that you invited me to be a part of, that some women that are all just kind of self-employed, trying to figure out our next steps and just supporting one another, which is what, you know, this podcast is about, women supporting women, helping each other find their way, even though we're in different, different fields, but just giving each other advice. And that's what this podcast is about. And I just appreciate you coming on and sharing your heart and sharing what you got going with us. 'Cause I know that, somebody out there needs this. And, I can't wait for them to hear it and put it out
Y'all
in the
are
world.
awesome. This whole concept is so appreciated, and that you pour the energy and love into it. That is beautiful, and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful to be
Oh,
here and just be in community with you guys.
well,
Thank
thanks.
you.
I know Stacey and I love it. We were yeah, it gives us a good excuse to hang out a little bit together sometimes. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
It is a
know
spark.
that
It's
is
part
a
of our
spark.
spark.
Yes.
It is.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you, Irene. We will, I'll
my
see you
goodness.
at our next little gathering, but thanks again for being here today. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. So appreciated.
All right. Bye.
God and my girl.